Hi, painting class. I was going to do this during a Google Meet, but then I thought you need to take notes on this stuff. And so if I record it, you can hit pause and write stuff down, and then you can play it again and rewind and all that kind of stuff. So I went with a video. Take notes on this information and know that a quiz is coming. And I am fully aware that you'll probably use your notes on the quiz. I would too. So take good notes. This is really important information that you need to know for this class in order to paint in general, okay? We're going to talk about different surfaces. We're going to talk about different types of paint, types of brushes, and you do need to know the differences in them, okay? So I'm going to shrink myself right here, and we are going to start by talking about painting supplies and all the procedures that we're going to be using or doing in this class. Okay, first of all, there are different types of painting grounds, and what a ground is a surface. So you want to write that down. Painting ground is the surface that you paint on. These are examples. You don't have to know every example. I just typed a bunch of them over the side. For instance, you can paint on paper, a cardboard box, poster board, illustration board, stretched canvas, canvas panels, canvas paper, wood, glass, or fabric. And of course, there are other things you can paint on. You know, you can paint on skin, you can paint on a building, you know, there's a concrete, there's different things you can paint on. But what you do have to know is that different types of paint work better on different types of surfaces. And that's not just something you can memorize and write down. You just kind of learn it over the years. So hopefully you will take more than just painting one class that you'll like this class. And as an elective, maybe you'll take painting 2 or 3 or portfolio, and you'll learn more, or even an IB, where you learn more about different paints and supplies and things that you use, okay? These are the types of paint that we will be using in this class. I don't know, because of our current situation with COVID, if we will get to all of them or not. For safety reasons, some of them cannot be, sent home with you, or for practical reasons. You know, I can't send you wax, because you have no way of melting that wax. So that's the encaustic part. So like I said, this all just comes into play, and if we don't get to it, hopefully you will take another painting class. We're gonna learn today about tempera, acrylic, watercolor, gouache, oil, encaustic, and batik. Okay, tempera paint is exactly what you used when you were in elementary school. Tempera paint is little kitty poster paint. It tends to smell like rotten eggs. It has egg in it, egg yolk, okay? And this egg yolk is mixed with a powder, a pigmented powder, a chemical powder, and it's mixed to create paint. Tempera paint comes in bottles. When you were in elementary, maybe it was even in a big jug and it had a pump on it, so you'd pump it out that way. You can buy it at Walmart in these little containers with caps that pop open, like a little set of tempera paints, or the kind that screw off, okay? Tempera is completely washable. I wouldn't say it's edible, but it won't make you sick if you do eat it, okay? In situations where little kids will be around it, it's safe for them, okay? If they lick their fingers or an animal gets into it or something like that. It's sold in these pans also. This is called dry cake tempera, where you have these dry pads of tempera paint, and you get them wet, kind of like watercolor, with a wet brush, and you can paint with it, okay? So those are the different types of tempera paint. Acrylic paints come in bottles like this in my classroom, or you can get them in little tubes like this, okay? And there's all different brands. Liquid-X, Blick, those are the ones that I buy from. Crayola is amazing paint, considering it's a little kid company, but I can't believe how thick that acrylic paint is. I never used it before I came here to Lee Summit, and I am just thrilled with the consistency of it. It's nice and thick. It's not runny and thin at all. And honestly, Blick brand, which I pay more for, tends to be thinner. You can get little bottles at Walmart or Hobby Lobby or Michael's or something like that. Those are acrylics. They come in apple barrel. I can't think of other brand names off the top of my head, but those are also acrylic paints. Watercolor paints come in different types. You can buy them in a pan like this. That's probably what you're used to, and that's what I sent home with you. Prang is a great brand where the colors are nice and bright, and they're hardened paint. And again, you get it wet with a paintbrush, you swish it around in the paint, and you paint with it, okay? or they come in dry pans like this. This is called dry cake watercolor. Then you have semi-moist watercolor, which is a consistency like this, okay? And they come in a tube, and you squeeze out about the size of like a pea, like the amount of toothpaste you'd put on your toothbrush. And you can paint with that amount for a long time. Painting classes received that kind of watercolor paint in these big white trays with a lid, and the lid comes off, and inside you have all of these colors. I wrote along the edges of the tray the different colors that you have access to, okay? And so I squeezed a little bit in everybody's tray. That should last you a very long time. Again, if you run out, you can buy stuff like this, or you can come see me and I'll get you some paint. They also make what's called liquid watercolor. It's almost like a dye or an ink. It is very bright pigment. It's very runny. It's very expensive. If we come back, we'll be able to use some of that liquid watercolor. It's really cool. They make something called gouache. Gouache is very much like watercolor, okay? The only difference is watercolor is transparent or see-through, meaning on a piece of paper, if you paint blue, you can see through the blue to the paper. So if you paint blue and you let it dry and then you put, let's say, red on top of it, you can look through the red to see the blue. So it'll mix to make purple, right? Gouache is opaque, O-P-A-Q-U-E, opaque, meaning not see-through, not transparent. So if I paint blue on my paper, like here, you don't see the white paper through it, okay? It's blue. And if you paint dark blue and then you paint a light blue on top, you can't see through the light blue, which is very much like, in my opinion, acrylic paint. So why use gouache, right? It's chalkier. Gouache has a different feel to it, a different texture to it. It's easier to transport if you're a person that paints outside versus hauling acrylics around. And then there's oil paint. Oil is exactly what it is. It's greasy. It's a chemical, a powdered pigment that is mixed with linseed oil, very much like cooking oil. It takes over a year to dry. You have to use chemicals and rags to wash up. It is combustible, meaning if you leave a rag laying around with oil paint on it, it can catch fire all by itself. If you don't believe me, Google oil paint combustible and watch lovely little videos on how that happens. It's very dangerous to do in your home, okay? We will have an oil painting unit here at school, and hopefully we'll be back before the end of the semester, and we will tackle it right away because it's my favorite, okay? Encaustic is painting with wax, colored waxes. See, they put it on a hot plate, and you move the wax around and you paint with it. When you put the paint on a surface, it immediately hardens because it cools down. So it'd be like painting with a wax candle. Batik is a dye. And it is a dye that you use to paint on fabrics. Scarves are made that way, and fabrics, different colored fabrics. It's very much like liquid watercolor. It's runny, and it's like a dye. Binders. Binders are, in Chinese words, you might want to pause this and write it down. Binders are what the actual item that binds or sticks the paint together, okay? So you take pigment, you mix a binder into it to make a certain kind of paint. So maybe you want to draw this in your sketchbook. You have your pigment, and if you mix drying oil with it, you get oil paint. That should say linseed oil. Linseed oil to get oil paint. Egg yolks to get tempera, gum arabic to get watercolor, and acrylic resin to get acrylic color, okay? So it's the same powdered pigments. It's mixed with different things to make these different types of paint. Primer is necessary to put down on a surface before you paint on it, okay? I showed you this list of different painting grounds or different surfaces, and I wrote over the side, some surfaces must be primed in order for the paint to stick to it, okay? So if I paint on my jeans, okay, and paint on the jeans and then throw them in the washing machine, it'll probably wash out. But if I put some kind of a binder into it or some kind of a primer down on my jeans and then paint on top of it, it'll stick. And it works that way with glass and wood and all these different canvases as well. You have to put primer down first. Brushes. Oh boy, brushes. You probably need to pause this. And if I were you, I would doodle each one, like draw a sketch of each of these brushes. A round brush is exactly what it says. It's pointy. It rolls off the table. It is round. A flat brush is exactly what it says. It is flat. Flat at the top, and it's almost like a little rectangle. A bright brush is a flat brush, but it has little corners nicked off on it, okay? A filbert brush is a flat brush, but it is more rounded even so than the bright. I use that to paint flower petals more than anything. Girls know it for blending eyeshadow, okay? It works really well on round surfaces and in painting rounded areas. A fan brush looks like a fan, okay? Mostly used to paint evergreen trees, blades of grass, things like that. Here's an angled brush. Our school really doesn't have any of those. You could take a flat brush and cut your own, why spend the money? A mop brush, okay, this is used for watercolor. It's called a mop brush because it literally sops up color off of the surface. And then you have what's called a rigger brush. A rigger is very similar to round, except that a rigger brush is used more for detail. Painting your name, whiskers on a cat, eyeliner on your eyes, that kind of thing, okay? So here's some more pictures. There's a flat brush. There's your filbert. There's your round or rigger. Fan, okay? These are palette knives. They are used to mix paint on your palette, okay? They're also good for scraping off of your palette and applying to the surface. Bob Ross uses a palette knife like this to paint his mountains. So yes, you can paint with them, but it does take practice and it is quite difficult. I threw a plastic one in your kit, okay? A cheaper version of a metal palette knife. The metal ones are kind of flexible, where the plastic ones are a little more rigid, but you can press with them and experiment with painting with them, okay? Cleaning your brush, really, really important. Always clean your brush in cool, soapy water. Hot water will melt the glue under the furlue, which holds the bristles in place. Okay, so let's talk about it. Here's a fan brush. Here's the handle. This is the furlue, and these are the bristles. If I use hot water underneath this furlue, there's a crimp right here, and all these little bristles are glued, like it's made and it's dipped in glue, and then the glue is shoved in this metal and it's crimped. So if I use hot water, metal conducts heat, and that glue softens, and then the bristles start falling out of your brush. So always use cool water. And when they dry, I put them in a cup with the bristles facing upward. Better yet, just lay it flat on a table. Like lay down a piece of paper toweling and lay your brushes on that to dry. If you don't clean your brushes, when you're done with them, the paint will harden in them, and then you'll have to go buy new brushes. So take care of them, okay? I rinse them in cold water. I use my hand. I use a bar of soap. I use pump soap. Liquid Dawn works. It doesn't matter what kind of soap. Use soap and wash it until all the pigment comes out of your brush, okay? You can use different water containers. Obviously, you don't have fancy stuff like this at home. This is a bottle sliced in half. You could use a cup. You could use a coffee cup, a bucket, an old yogurt container, something like that. If you use a coffee cup, know if it's ceramic, it'll probably come clean in the dishwasher, okay? Palettes, I gave you a kind like this for your acrylic. It's in that red container. And I gave you a square palette on your watercolor where you can flip it upside down and use the lid as a palette. I use glass palettes at home. I love glass for my acrylics and my oils. Not good with watercolor, okay? So this is what I do at home. When you set up a palette, keep your warm colors on one end and all your cool on another, and then your neutrals on the other. Neutrals being your browns, your blacks, your grays. I use a lot of white, okay? So I squirt out a lot of white. I gave you little cups. If I were you, I would keep them in their cups with their lids on. I wouldn't go squirting them into a palette because they're going to dry up on you, and then you won't have any paints. There are all different color names. Okay, these are the fancy name for colors. Don't worry about these now. I'm going to do that in a different lesson where you learn your color names. But be aware that it's not just red anymore. It's alizarin crimson. And a blue, there's phthalo blue and there's ultramarine. And, you're going to have to learn your color names. Okay, that's going to be expected of you. I think I already talked about pigments and surfaces. So I don't really know why this is repeating. Okay, acrylic paint can be transparent, you can glaze with it, you can brush with it, and you can paint in impasto, which means really thick. I hope you took good notes because you have a quiz upcoming on this information.